Hey everybody, welcome back to CIS 39. Today we're going to be covering lesson number 16 on how to create a subdivision, high resolution, and game model. Alright, so the main idea is that in the last lesson we saw how we could start with a template in Mudbox of a high resolution version of the model and add a lot of detail to it, and then export that into Maya, turn it into an Alembic file, and then trace off of the high-res model to get the low poly model. Because remember, to get normal maps, you have to have a high poly version and a low poly version that is UV mapped. So in this lesson, we're going to go the opposite direction. We're not going to go from a high-res version to a low-res version. We're going to start off with a low-res version, work our way up, and then bring it all back into Mudbox at the end to make the normal map for the game version of the model. So there's three models. There's the subdivision model that we start off with in Maya. That's the one that you see here in this picture that's all subdivided up. Now obviously if this was for a video game, this would be too high of a poly count for something as simple as what this prop is. So this prop is supposed to be a toolbox. Up here is the lid for the toolbox, down here is the bottom of the toolbox. So we're just keeping it to a nice simple model for this lesson. And so there's no toolbox high poly version to start with in Mudbox. So we have to make our own version in Maya and then bring that over to Mudbox to subdivide. Subdivide it up to make the high-res version of the model. We can then use stencils to add in detail and stuff that would otherwise be impossible to add by hand. And then finally, export this over to Maya, just like we did with the frog, and then trace off of it to create our low-res version of the model that would actually be used in the game. And then one final step is we got to bring this game model back over to Mudbox to bake the normal map from the high down onto the low. All right, so that's the general workflow for today. All right, let's start things off. So I'm going to go ahead and start off by just making a new project. New. Okay, toolbox project. Save that wherever you guys want to save it. I'm going to go ahead and just put it on the desktop. Okay, I'm going to go to File and then Save Scene As. Make sure that I'm in my Project Scenes folder. This is going to be my subdivision model. So I'm going to call it Subd Toolbox, short for Subdivision Toolbox. Okay, next I want to check to make sure that all my settings are correct for exporting from Maya over to Mudbox. So remember way back in lesson 6, we covered all the different criteria that needed to be addressed before you are able to export a model and import it into Mudbox and have everything show up and look correctly. So if you're unfamiliar with that, make sure you give that a quick review, but otherwise you'll see me do everything now anyways. So first off, you want to make sure that the units are set to centimeters for both Maya and Mudbox. Mudbox, it's always centimeter, you can't change it, but in Windows you can go to Settings, Preferences, and then See, and if you get this error message, just temporarily make a new blank scene like I did there by clicking on the shortcut. Hopefully yours doesn't do that to you guys. And then under Settings, under Linear, make sure that's set to centimeter before you export. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open that other scene back up that I just made a second ago. Okay. All right, next. So I know that I'm set to centimeter. The next thing is for my grid. I need to make sure the grid is the same here and in Mudbox by going to Display, Grid Options, and make sure that that's set to 1000, 101, and if that's true, then it will be the same size grid here and over in Mudbox. All right, so we are ready to start creating our subdivision version of the model. So I'm going to go ahead and create a simple cube by clicking here on the shelf. This is the shortcut for creating a cube, and you can barely see it, but it is down there. It's just really tiny because we have scaled everything up so much. So I'm going to go ahead and scale everything up by 100 so that I can see my cube. All right, next I'm going to go ahead and scale it in just a little bit into a rectangular shape. Next I'm going to go ahead and go into face selections, choose the top face, and then use the extrude tool, which is the shortcut right here. Just pull up to extrude that out, and then I'm just going to go ahead and use the green scale handle to scale it in just a little bit. All right, so there's my basic shape for the toolbox. Next I'm going to go ahead and use the insert edge loop tool. Let's reset that. Remember, you use this to drag along an edge and create new edges. So I'm just going to go ahead and, oops, Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and select this face here in the center, and then extrude that out, and then select edges, and move this one back using the move tool. And then last but not least, I'm going to go ahead and go back into face selection. Why it's not letting me? There we go. Select this bottom face and delete it. All right. Okay. So remember when we subdivide something in Mudbox, we want the size of the faces to all be roughly the same. So the next thing I'm going to do is use the Insert Edge Loop tool to insert a whole bunch of edge loops and make it so that all the squares on this are roughly the same size. So Insert Edge Loop tool. I'm going to choose multiple edge loops and increase this from 2 to 9. And just click one time on any edge, here and here, and you should be able to get a box that looks like this that's roughly subdivided up evenly. All right, the next thing I need to do is check to make sure that my edges are correctly set to hard and soft. And it turns out the only edge loop that I need to make hard is this one here that's going to separate the lid of the toolbox from the rest of the toolbox. So I'm going to go into edge selection mode, select this one, and then change those to be hard edges. And then up here, all the edges on the inside of what's going to be this little metal piece, we want those to all be soft edges. So make those all soft. All right. Okay. So there we go. So that's going to be our subdivision model. It's mostly done. There's a couple other quick things that we need to do. First, remember that you can't have any non-1 values here under scale, or else it will be incorrect in Mudbox. So we're going to go to Modify and freeze all the transformations. I always like to also delete the construction history, just to clean everything up. Okay, and then the last thing I'm going to do is UV map this. Now remember, subdivision models, or the high-res version of the model, in Mudbox does not actually have to be UV mapped. I'm just doing this to avoid getting an error message when I go to export it, or I'm sorry, when I go to import it. So I'm just going to do just a generic automatic UV mapping on it. And then we'll check out that UV mapping. All right, I'm going to hit A to frame all, make sure everything is in 0, 1 space. And it also helps if you go to image shade UVs so that you can actually make sure that everything is blue. All right, so it looks like everything is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this one more time. I already saved it once. I'm just going to click on the disk here. Actually, let's put it in object mode before I do that. Okay. And then, yeah, it's ready to go. So that's all we do to create our subdivision version of the model. Next, I'm going to go ahead and export this into an FBX file. So export selection. Make sure you're in FBX. Make sure you have smoothing groups turned on so that you can get that hard, soft edge data that you have about the model. Make sure that it goes into your scenes folder. So I'm going to call this subd_FBX and export. All right, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and close down Maya and open up Mudbox. Now, you could just leave them both running, but my computer tends to get really slow when I run both and try to do a screen capture. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording and open up Mudbox. All right, so here we are in Mudbox. So I'm going to go ahead and a couple of things. Make sure that under my preferences, under FBX, make sure that you have the option to import materials turned off. Import materials and textures, make sure that is off. Okay, and then I'm going to just go to File, and then I could go to Open or I could go to Import. If I go to Open, it's going to look for, oh, you can change it to all formats so that you can find the FBX file. So I'm just going to go into my Scenes folder for my project and open up my toolbox that I made just a second ago. All right, it should look like that. All right, and again, UVs don't really matter for the high res. Okay, let's turn the wireframe on and see what we can do here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift D to subdivide. Oh, and actually, I'm lying to you. Now if you mess up, by the way, which I just did, you can just go to File and Open and reopen that. Okay, so what I need to do next is I need to set my subdivision options. So the subdivision options are what you see here. The important ones are these ones: smooth position, preserve hard edge, increase hard edge. Long story short is that here you have a hard edge. And if you have crease hard edges turned on, what it does is it creases or bends the hard edge as you subdivide. So here you can see this is a square, and over here it's a circle because it creased it. And we don't want that. The only options we want is to smooth positions and to preserve the hard edges. That's it. So to do that in Mudbox, we need to go to Mesh and then add Subdivision Options, and then just turn off everything except for those two options, and that's it. So now let's go ahead and hit Shift D. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and subdivide this up. I'm at 25. I don't want to go too high because my computer, well, the stencil will look bad if I don't go too high, but then the recording starts to get really slow. Let's see, let me check how many. I'm going to go a little bit higher. I'm going to go one more time, and hopefully the computer doesn't get laggy. All right, so I went up to level 5, but hopefully you guys have better computers than me. Fun fact, the computer I'm using to record all these is like 10 years old because I usually do everything from the college where they buy my computer for me. And they, get me nice stuff because, hey, government, it's got to spend that money. Anyways, all right, so back to this. So now that we have this subdivided up, we can go ahead and start stenciling it. So I'm going to go ahead and go to Layers, make sure that you're in Sculpt, and I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm just going to call this my base. All right, and then here's where the fun part comes in. You just go through your stencils, find whatever you want to make this look like. So let's, for say example, I want to make this look like it's made out of wood. I turn on the picture of the wood, and then I go to my sculpt tool, use B to size it, and then use M to change the strength, and then just see what we got. Okay, that doesn't look too bad. I just got to be careful that I don't go up into where the lid is. Now later I'll show you guys how you can get really precise with stencils to make it look really even. But for this one, we'll just go ahead and throw this in here. And of course, make sure you put that in a layer. Okay, so there's going to be, and you can, there's all these little shortcuts down here in the bottom left corner. You can press Q to temporarily turn the stencil off. So there we go, instant wooden toolbox. Okay, next let's go ahead and make a metal lid. So I'm going to go ahead and find a template in here, or so I should say a stencil of what looks like rivets, but I can't find it. Is it that one? No, I don't want a rock lid. There it is. All right, so I'm going to make a metal lid. Okay, now this was obviously way too big, so I need to scale it down. I can do that using S and then the right mouse key. So S and then left drag to bring this down. And then if I want, so that I don't run out of space over here, because if I start to stencil this, you can see it gets a hard line there. So I'm going to hit undo. I can turn on tiling. Where's that at? Flip. Use tiles. There we go. So that way I don't have to worry about where the border is for this. So I'm going to go ahead and again, I'm just going to rough this in. And note that I'm getting some bleed over between the wood and the metal, but that's okay. This is just practice for you guys getting your first time using stencils. And then the workflow of going from a subdivision version of a model to a high-res version of the model like we're working with here. It's like instant artist, right? You didn't know how to, you don't need to know how to draw wood. You just got to get a picture of wood and let the software do the work for you. Okay, these are a little high, so I'm going to go ahead and reduce the strength. I could have put those in a separate layer, so that way I don't also lower the strength of the wood, but that's okay. That turned out okay. Looks like a toolbox to me. Okay, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add some character to it by adding some wear and tear. And I want to make sure to add a new layer before I do that. I'm going to turn off the base sculpt when I do it so I can see what that looks like better. So they have lots of different things in here that look like things like scratches. So let me go ahead and turn this off and scale it way up. And I'm going to rotate it using S plus left mouse button. And you just kind of go in here and throw some damage onto your box because that's what makes things look real, right? Nothing is perfect. So I'm going to go and smooth that a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and find another rough looking texture in here. Oh yeah, let's put some hair on it. Just kidding. All right, let's see. over some other wear and tear stuff. Okay, there we go. So again, it doesn't matter. Now this is actually pulling out. I want to hit Control so it pushes in. Lower the strength of it a little bit. Okay. So again, it's just, there's no right or wrong. You're just trying to make it look like it's got some age to it. But it's not totally perfect. So now I turn the box or the base back on. You can see the scratches and whatnot are underneath. All right. Now you guys, I encourage you guys play around a lot more. Look through the stencils and then just add a lot of like wear and tear to this thing. And just give it a lot of character. Okay, so we're going to say that this is the finished version of the prop. Now I know there's no color that's been added to it yet, but that's because that's what we're going to cover in the next lesson. So we'll say that as far as the sculpt part of it, that we're happy with the way that this prop looks, and we're going to bring that now into the video game as it looks here. Okay, so let's go ahead and export this back over to Maya and then create an Alembic version of it that we can trace off of. So I'm going to go to select it here in the object list, and then go to File, and then go to Export, and then make sure to choose that as an FBX file, and then in your scenes, call it something like High Poly FBX. All right, and now while it's doing all this, I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording once again. I'm going to close down Mudbox and open up Maya. Okay, so I'm back in Maya, and I just want to emphasize that you don't need to close down Mudbox or Maya as you guys are working. You're probably not going to run into latency issues, so just leave them both open and run at the same time. I'm only doing that because of the stupid recording software and how it crashes everything. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and set my project back to, let's do recent projects, toolbox. And I'm going to go ahead and make a new scene. Okay, file save scene as. And then I'm going to call this High Poly. And this is going to be saved as a Maya file, not an FBX file. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and import the toolbox that I just exported from Mudbox. And then make sure you have FBX set here under your options. And then if it goes into your data folder, you're going to have to go into wherever you saved it. So hopefully you've been saving everything in source images. Right, so there's my High Poly import. And from here, the steps are pretty much the same as we did for the toad for tracing the model. So you can see this is a very, very high poly version. See, this is got like 821,000 tries. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and select it, and then we're going to go to cache, GPU cache, and then export selection, and make sure you have it set to current frame. Name it something like toolbox. Okay, we're done with this one. We can delete it. And then we're going to go back to cache and import the Alembic file. Okay. Once you have the Alembic version, make it a live surface, just like with Mr. Toad. You're going to open up your modeling toolkit. Remember, you may have to go to Mesh Tools, Modeling Toolkit. Mine's already docked down here. And we're going to select the toolbox and turn on Quad Draw. Lucky for us, this is going to be a lot easier to trace off of than the Toad model that we did in the last lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and drop 4 points, press Shift, and then click to create the square. And I think most of you did the last lab when I checked, but it looked like one or, I believe, no, actually take it back. There's a couple people that did not do the tracing stuff for the frogs. So this may be a little bit confusing because I'm not going to go through and re-explain all this stuff. But you might be able to just kind of follow along by watching the video and still hang in there with understanding what retopology is. Okay. All right. So I'm going to drop 4 more points here. Press Shift, left click, give myself another square. And I'm going to weld these by dragging them over the top of one another. So remember, when you drag 2 vertices over the top, it automatically creates a connection when you're using the Quad Draw tool. Okay. That one got a little too far forward. So I'm just making the low poly version of this. So remember that the subdivision model had a really high polygon count. And this is important too. Sometimes you'll get, it's not connected. So you gotta make sure that, can you guys see that? Yeah, you can. So you wanna make sure that that icon changes and that it's actually welding the pieces together, otherwise it would not be good. So what was I saying? Low poly version. So yeah, we're creating like the lowest polygon count we could possibly get for this model while still maintaining the overall shape of the model. Because remember, in video games, polygon count matters. The lower the polygon count, the faster your game's going to run, the easier it is for the game to process the drawing of the models. Weld. Let's move it up here. I think I might be off a little bit on where I'm saying the lid is. But there we go. All right, and then for the bottom, I just need to weld these vertices together down here. All right, so there's the bottom of our toolbox. Let's go ahead and trace in the top of our toolbox. Now you may think you just add a couple squares and hit shift. For some reason it doesn't like, all the years I've ever done this, you'd think that it would automatically figure things out, but no, it wants me to make these little squares and tediously go through and connect each one. Now also you may notice sometimes that it doesn't like respond when you go to click and drag it. Sometimes you just got to change the angle that you're looking at the model from, and then it'll pick up on where it's supposed to go. Okay. For this one, I'm going to go ahead and hit tab and then left click to extrude the edge. And just drag this out here. Surprised, the computer's actually really fast right now. Hey, it figured it out. I pressed shift and it figured out that it needs to put a square there. Let's see if I get lucky again. Nope, didn't think so. All right, so let's... And again, this is just sort of a tedious process, but at least it's easy to do, right? There we go. Just making sure that's actually connecting in. I think that's probably the place where you guys really got to be careful. Is you got to make sure that you're not leaving gaps in the model anywhere. That's actually connecting things together. Yeah, like right now I'm clicking and dragging, nothing's happening. So there, I changed the angle and then it worked. Okay, so there's most of it. And then remember, you can always click on the surface and then isolate select to kind of check and see how your low poly version of your model is turning out. I'm not even going to put a bottom to this because we're going to assume that this is going to be sitting somewhere in the game and players can't pick it up and find out that it's got nothing underneath it. Remember, it's all about this polygon count. Look at that, 16 polygons. That's nothing. You draw that thing in a split second. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and add some squares here. And here. And I'm going to connect these together. You want to make sure you see that icon change. See, like here it's just a red circle, and it becomes like a slightly darker red circle when it's going to weld things together. All right, there we go. Let's see if we can figure this one out. No, you can't figure it out. I'm too confused. Oh, there we got it. Okay. What about the bottom? Can you figure that one out? Nope. So whenever you know that there's 4 vertices and that it should be able to figure out there's a square, you just gotta do the old manual connecting. And it's worth mentioning right now that this is not the only, Maya is not the only software that you can use to do tracing. There's all kinds of software out there that you can use to do tracing with. I can't So it may be the case that you find a better tool at some point in your career as a game artist. Okay, let's see. Needs to be over here. Come on. There we go. Let's move that one down a little bit. And then almost done, you guys. We're just going to finish off the one more. Can it figure out this one? Yes. Okay, good. All right, move these right down to the edge of my visor, and let's check it out and see how it looks. All right, let me turn the grid off. It's a distraction. All right, so there we go. 32 tries, 32 polygons off of an 8 million or 800,000 vertex model. All right, so we're almost done. So we're done tracing, so we can actually go ahead and turn off quad draw, and we can turn off this being a live surface and delete our high poly version. All right, and then we just want to make sure our edges are correctly set to hard or soft. It looks like these are hard edges here on the inside, and one of the ways you can check to see if they're hard or soft edges is to go to display, polygons. I'm going to rip that menu off, and then you can go to hard edges. And you can see we do in fact have some edges in here that should not be hard. So I'm going to go ahead and work through and set those all as soft. So that one, 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 that one. Those should all be soft edges. All right, there we go. Oops. Let's go back. Because I don't want to leave it in that mode. Display, polygons, standard edges. So I can see the whole thing. Okay, and then back here into object mode. Okay, so there we go. So it's almost complete. What is missing? You say, what else do I need on this? I'm going to press Control A to bring back my, it's not opening, channel box. So I'm going to make sure these are all one. I'm going to make sure that my display is still set to the right settings. All right. Going to, I don't need to freeze any transformations. It looks like they're all there, but I can go ahead and delete the construction history. But before I do that, I want to go ahead and give this UVs. So I could go through and I could be kind of rigorous with this and make sure that I don't have seams on it that would otherwise be there with an automatic projection. But just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to let you guys go ahead and do an automatic projection on it. So remember way back when we did the soldier guy in lesson number 3? I showed you guys how you could unfold the soldier guy using the unfold and the smooth tools to get a nice layout for it. But just in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and just do an automatic projection. But if you want to be ambitious and go through and do a nice high poly or a nice detailed unfold of this, then I encourage you to do that. So I just want to hit A, see what we got. Shade those UVs, and you can see everything's fitting nicely in 0, 1 space. I may need to scale some of these down because they're pretty close. So if you have to, you can always right click. You can't see the menu, but you can choose shell and then just manually go through and scale some of these down and just make sure you got a lot of space between everything. So like I can already tell that the way the automatic mapping did, the vent is going to be, it's going to have seams on it. So we'll see when this finishes why it's better to go in and manually do it. And if you have the extra space, why not use it? Okay. All right, that's good enough. Remember, the main thing is that they all have to be blue and you don't want them overlapping each other. All right, so this is ready to export to bake an oil map off of. Yay, we're almost done. So let's go ahead and go to, first let's save it. Have I given it a name? Oh, I called this high poly. Okay, let's call this game model. File, save, scene as. Game model. let's go ahead and export it. Call this game FBX. So notice there now we have all three versions of this that I mentioned. So we have the game model, the subdivision model, and the high poly model. And we went from low, the subdivision, to high, and then I just overwrite the name of my thing right there. Back to low. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and once again pause while I shut down Maya and reopen Mudbox. All right, so I'm back in Mudbox. The only thing I really want to note here is the name of the high poly version. That's PCube1. So I'm probably going to need to rename that at some point. So next I'm going to go ahead and import the game model. All right. So polysurface 1 is my game model, and PCube1 is my high-res model. So I need to know that when I go to create my map. So I'm going to go to UV and map, extract texture map, new operation. And then I'm going to choose to make a normal map. So PCube1 is my high poly, so I'm going to make that the source. Polysurface 1 is my low, so add that to my target. Smooth the high poly, and then the same options we always set every time we do this. Closest to low res, maybe one level of anti-aliasing to improve the quality. Do not preview it, and then choose where you want to save it. We want to put that in the source images folder for our project and call this toolbox normal. Okay, and extract. All right, finished successfully. All right, I'm going to close this, and I don't need to save this. If I had to, I could always just re-import the two models together and bake another map off of it, but I don't actually have to save this Mudbox file. All right, so I'm going to go back to Maya, and we're going to apply that normal map and see if we did it right. All right, so we're back in Maya, and we've loaded up our game model that we traced off of the high-res version just a moment ago. So we're going to go ahead and assign a new material to this. So remember, you can either right-click and choose Assign New Material. I'll go ahead and show you where you can do it from here, just so you can see what I'm choosing. Assign New Material. We want to always put a blend if we're using a normal map. We may need to delete the construction history to get rid of all these extra tabs, so let's do that. Delete all by type, history. Makes it easier to find the blend material that we just added a second ago. A couple preliminaries, make sure you have pushed 4, 5, and then 6 to turn on hardware texturing. For the renderer, I recommend using the high quality legacy one. It actually gives better results than Viewport 2.0. And then we're going to attach our normal map to our bump mapping channel by clicking on that. Choose File, Use As, Tangent Space Normal. Click on the mapping button. Click on the folder. Look for your normal map. Looks like it baked out good to me. And then voila. There you go. That's it, you guys. That is a workflow for how to create a subdivision model. Export it to Mudbox, subdivide it, export that back, trace off of it, throw the low poly or game model back into Mudbox, create your normal map, and then you have everything that you need for your game. So notice that even though that we didn't have a bottom on it, it still worked. All right, and again, we can see we're only at 32 tries, but yet we get all this incredible detail. And that's the beauty and the power of normal maps for video games. All right, so like I said in the next, oh, and then I just want to point out, actually, that it's not too bad. There's no seam on here. Usually you can see the seam because of the way the UVs are. Anyways, it's probably because I moved them over and made them bigger, so it hid the seam better. So not too bad for just applying an automatic projection. All right, now before I turn off the lesson, I do want to mention that the next lesson I'm going to cover the architectural proposals that you guys need to make for your final projects. And do this. There's not a lot of difference between this and the shape of maybe a house. I could have, instead of using wood, I could have made the wood smaller. I could have found a stencil for a window. I could have found roof shingles and put these here. So keep that in mind, that when you're going to do your final project, the more basic you can keep the shape in terms of using basic primitives like spheres and cubes and cylinders and cones, It's just going to make it that much easier on you to put everything together. The other thing is when you go to do your final project, you don't have to weld everything together. So let's say that I made this pipe here. Did I say pipe? I don't know. What is that? Cone? And then scale it up. Okay. Oh, that's too big. All right. No, 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 no. Yes. Okay. Scale it down and then just move it up. So let's just say that I had gone through like the whole modeling process for this other piece, and then I could just import it into my scene, and then I could just put that down on my model like so. And the point I'm trying to make here is that I don't need to actually connect anything. For your final project, you don't need to go through and figure out like, you know, how to cut this open and weld vertices together. You don't need to do that. You just need to take each piece of your building through the process that I just went through here, and then just assemble everything together in one scene for your final building, right? So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that makes it a lot less stressful, the idea of sculpting a building, because it's really no more challenging than what you just did for the toolbox. Okay. All right, so also a quick thing I want to mention, make sure that you guys are using Maya 2017. If you're using a more advanced version, I don't have the more advanced versions of Maya at my house, so I can't grade your work. So make sure that you're turning things into that you're using Maya 2017. And then also make sure that you're zipping up the right folder. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. So let's say I wanted to go to turn this in. So when you go to zip up your work, make sure that you are choosing the right folder. So remember, this is the project folder. It's the one that contains all these folders, because that'll make it so that I can find all your work in there. All right, and then also you want to make sure that you have your source images in the correct folder. So if I want to go to turn this in, just right click on the folder, choose send to compress zip folder, and then give it some type of name. All right, and that's what you're going to turn in is the zip folder. Okay. All right, you guys, that's everything for lesson number 16. I hope you guys are doing well with everything. Hope everything's going good at the home, and I will talk to you soon.